Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking a little bit about tuning your cars, upgrading your cars, how to figure out what's best for your car. Alright, so in Forza Horizon 4, I recommend that you kind of, if you're starting out, pick something with a little bit less horsepower, something not as out there, not too exotic, something simple. And nothing is really simpler than the Miata. There's some other cars that you can go with as well, but I'm gonna choose this one for the sake of demonstration. Now, when you're upgrading your cars, you got all these different areas that you can pick things from, right? You got engine, platform and handling, drivetrain, tires and rims, aero and appearance, and conversions, like engine and drivetrain, like all-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, and whatnot. So when you're upgrading a car, you really want to pick what you're gonna do with the car and pick what class you want it to be before you really jump into it. Otherwise, you're just going to end up probably fully upgrading the car. It's going to be a mess, and nothing's really going to blend well. It's not going to be very balanced. It's just going to be a super high power car that may or may not handle well, and who knows, whatever. It's just whatever the top potential of that car is. But today, what we're going to do is, I think what I'm going to see is maybe taking this car into B class, possibly A class. We'll see how it goes from there. I think I'm going to keep it rear wheel drive, and we're going to make it a street tune car for racing on the roads. So we're going to jump in here, and actually first, before I start that, so normally when I do upgrades, I like to work my way from right to left and end up in the engine. Obviously, that'll depend on what car you're working on as well as what you're going for. Like if you want a drag build, you're going to start in the engine and go from there. But if, for me, this is what I like to start out with overall. In general, I start out from right and work my way left. I start over at conversions just, because normally I'll do an all-wheel drive conversion to make the car perform better in Horizon 4, which unfortunately all-wheel drive is the better way to go for most people. It's easier to handle the car, and it's much more predictable for the most part. It can get a little bit wonky with the tuning that you have to put into it because there's a lot more things that you have to take into account. There's also an increased weight, which may not benefit you at all, especially if you're driving something like this Miata, which weighs I think like 2,300 pounds, somewhere around there. But yeah, so we're going to jump into conversion first. We're going to leave the stock engine in, I believe. Obviously, we're going to leave it stock drivetrain, which is rear wheel drive. I might throw forced induction into it at some point later on, maybe a turbo, possibly a supercharger, we'll see. And I think I'm not going to put the Rocket Bunny kit on it this time. I like to put the Rocket Bunny kit on it because I personally think it looks good. It gives this car much better handling. But for what we're going for, I think B class, it's not really going to need it. So right now we're going to jump out of conversion. Next we're going to go into aero, and we're just going to put on some stuff that I think looks good. You don't really need to go in with adjustable stuff yet for lower class cars, specifically like B class, C class. D class definitely doesn't need it. But once you start getting into things that are faster, once you start breaking like 150, 200 miles an hour, you definitely are going to need aero. It's really going to benefit you. It also depends on what car it is. Again, for the Miata, it's slow enough that it doesn't matter. We're going to go with this. I like having a little bit of a lip on there. Maybe do racing beat for that. Maybe go with a racing beat rear end on here as well. Side skirts. Sometimes you'll have mud flaps. You'll have actual side skirt extensions and whatnot. They do decrease drag. They increase your weight ever so slightly. You see here it increases by 4 pounds for either one of these. It doesn't, the weight that you get from it doesn't really matter too much for the amount of drag that it reduces. And I don't really know exactly the numbers behind the drag reduction, but any reduction to drag is going to significantly help out your driving. in general and the way the car feels. So I'm going to go with Racing Beat for this as well. And I like to put this hood on it. It also decreases the weight by 4 pounds, so you kind of balance that out with the side skirts, and you know, you get a little bit better performance out of that as well. So with tire compounds, you know, everybody likes to just go all the way over, do the race tire compounds, either one of these. They're exactly the same, one just has tire lettering on it. But everybody likes to go all the way over and go to race tire compounds. That's not always the best thing that you can do. Obviously, if you're doing drag, you use drag radials. If you're doing off-road racing, or if it's winter season, you can put on winter or rally tires, as they're called. But if we're sticking, you know, B class, you don't really need race tires. We are going to be going a little bit faster, so I don't really want stock tires. Maybe something a little bit better than street. I like to personally have more grip with my cars, so I'm normally on the upper end of tire compounds, just because it really does drastically improve the way the car feels, and it works the same way in real life. You get better tires on your car, it's just going to be much better. But we're going to go with sport tires for this. Now, with all-wheel drive cars, I like to go all the way to max with the width on tires. For me personally, that's what I do. You have to be careful though, because it does increase the weight by a significant amount, having max width tires on both front and rear. What we're going to do here is go 195s in the front, and since it's a rear wheel drive car, we're going to go a little bit wider on the back to kind of avoid wheel spin. And I like to upgrade the track width to as wide as possible. Kind of get that flush fitment. It looks a little bit better in my opinion. There's no reason really not to. It doesn't change your point values. It simply just changes the looks of the car, but it does increase your handling. So that is an added benefit. Now with rims, it's good to go with a rim that is lightweight. It reduces unsprung weight, which is something just beyond this video right now. It's a little bit more advanced. But one of the biggest things is it just overall reduces weight of the car. So I like to go with wheels that I think look good, but also weigh less than what the car has. I try and stick with the lightest wheels, because personally for me, I like driving cars that are very lightweight, very nimble, and easy to handle as well. A lot of people on the Miatas like to go with these Enki RPF ones, so that's what we're going to stick with on here. I am going to upgrade the rim size here to 15s. That's almost personal preference for the most part. There's a lot that you can get into with upgrading the rim size, but for the purpose of this, normally I don't upgrade my rim size at all, but Miatas in general, real life and in the game, they also perform better with 15-inch rims, so we're going to go ahead and stick with that. Plus it looks a little bit better, fills out the wheel well some more. Now in here, for the most part, I go all the way to the racing side of things when I'm doing this. I like to be able to tune everything, so having the ability to tune things. With the clutch, basically your shift times are better. That's the only thing it really improves. It does decrease your weight a little bit when you upgrade the clutch, so there's no reason not to do that. And shifting better can help you get that extra edge on your opponents, say, you know, if they have the stock clutch, or you know, their car just in general is just a slower shifting car. You can shift faster, which means you can get into your next gear faster, which means you can pass them, you can take turns faster, you can accelerate faster, etc., etc. Next thing we're going to jump into is the transmission. Normally, I like to at least go with the sport transmission so that I can tune final drive, but I'm going to go with the race transmission. Now, keep in mind that when you do this, you look at the numbers there, it changes acceleration and launch quite a bit when you're doing this. That's because sometimes it'll add a gear, it'll change the number of gears you have. I think the stock Miata transmission probably has 4 or 5 gears in it. When you upgrade it, it probably adds a 6th gear or a 5th gear or something like that. When you do the race transmission, it gives you definitely 6 gears for that. And you can tune each gear individually as well. Driveline, this is your drive shaft. This is a great way to reduce weight of the car, and I normally try and put the race driveline on as much as I can. just to reduce the weight overall of the car. It's going to make it handle better. And good rule of thumb that people like to say is, you know, you add horsepower, you're faster in a straight line. You reduce weight, you're faster everywhere. So one of the biggest things for me is weight reduction. I like to try and reduce the amount of weight that I have on a vehicle as much as possible so that I can accelerate into corners faster, out of corners faster as well, and just overall just have a faster car that feels faster without actually having to be faster. So we're going to go with that, and then I do the race diff so that I can have full diff tuning for that. There's no reason not to. It never affects your point values. And you're able to tune it for however you want it to be. Now, platform and handling, this is a big one for me. I normally always go with race everything in here just so I can tune everything. Now, brakes, you don't need to have race brakes. Most cars will brake fine, especially in B-Class. This car will probably brake fine with street or sport brakes. It's light enough that it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to go with race brakes just because I get that tuning ability so that I can change my braking force as I was talking about in my previous video. Now, normally in the springs and dampers, I like to go with either race, rally, or drift if I'm drifting. But I stick with race or rally because I get the ability to tune everything. Rally I normally only use for rally cars or off-road vehicles, stuff like that. But it really depends on what you're doing with it. Since we're sticking to the street, I'm going to go with the race suspension on that one. And same thing with the anti-roll bars. I'm going with race on both of these. They decrease weight by a few pounds, and I also get the ability to tune my anti-roll bars, which helps stiffen up the car or loosen it up if need be. But it just gives me another way that I can adjust things, which I love. So this car is ridiculously light already. But as I was saying earlier, I love weight reduction. So I will normally take the hit of the 30 or so points that weight reduction will normally be for upgrading it all the way. This depends on what I'm trying to do. I might go to weight reduction last on some things, depending on if it's close to the edge of the point value that I'm trying to get to. Since we're nowhere near the point value that I'm trying to get to yet, I'm going to go with full race weight reduction. And then one thing that I'm looking for with the roll cage is the front balance. So you can see there it goes from 51 to 50. It does increase your weight a significant amount, so you have to kind of keep that in mind. Look at these numbers, see how it benefits you in your 0 to 60, or if it even benefits you at all. Sometimes it'll drastically reduce your speed, like you can see here with this, the stock. It's 7.6 and 21 for 0 to 60 and 0 to 100 respectively. Then you go up to this race, and it's 8 seconds and 22. So quite a dramatic change in your acceleration speed there. But if you look at the braking distance, it drops the braking distance. It helps it a little bit. Not by much, but a little bit. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that out for now. I like to come back to that as one of the last things that I do as well, depending on how it affects the car, to see if I'll benefit from it after I go through my engine and whatnot. So normally when I'm going through the engine, we'll come in here, and depending on what the car is, these are all the things that you're going to see. If you have forced induction, you're going to also see intercooler as well, and the intake manifold throttle body will most likely disappear. But what I like to do in here first is go into exhaust, because it is the most dramatic weight reduction in the engine category that you can have. So you see here we're weighing in at 1,922 pounds, and now it's 1,854. We increased horsepower by 22, and we also increased our torque as well by, it looks like, 19 foot-pounds. So that's a dramatic change. It does increase our point value by about 50 points, but I think for the weight reduction that we're getting from that, the horsepower gain is good as well. So I normally always try and do exhaust first. Now some other things that are really good for reducing weight is the intake manifold and throttle body as well, pistons and compression, valves, and I believe displacement drops your weight. No, it does not. Okay, but those will drop your weight. Like you can see here, this drops it a couple of pounds, not too much. Intake drops it by a few pounds as well. Pistons drop it as well, drop that weight down. We said displacement didn't. Valves drop it down usually by a couple of pounds as well. One of the things that I like to go into is the flywheel. So the biggest thing with flywheels is they help the car rev faster, so acceleration is much better if you have a race flywheel or a higher level flywheel. The other thing is as well, with a flywheel that's higher level, not only is it going to be lighter, so you're going to rev faster, but the car is also going to be lighter again. And we're always going for lightness because lightness means fastness. So we're going to do that. I've already got the exhaust in there. I believe I'm going to put the intake manifold on, see how that affects it. I like to kind of put cams in there too, but depending on the car, they drastically increase the amount of power you have and also the point value. So let's see if I take that off. And a lot of doing this is of upgrading is kind of messing around with things, seeing how things affect your times on this sheet here. Like you can see there, I dropped my acceleration of 0 to 60 by 0.3 seconds, which is quite a lot, and I dropped my 0 to 100 by almost 2 seconds, which is kind of ridiculous. So we're actually going to go ahead and put that on, that first one, just because the next one brings me into A class, and I don't want to do that. I want to stay in B class. I'm going to try and put this on, and there we go. We're at 699 there. It don't get the benefits of the weight reduction there, so we're going to test and see if these other things that increase my power will decrease my weight some as well. So that decreases my weight by about 2 pounds, but only increases it by 10 horsepower. Pistons and compression. There we go, 13, and we also increased it by, or decreased our weight by 2 pounds. So I believe I'm going to go with that. That's a pretty good mod there to do. And I'll just go through some of these and see, because sometimes you can add things without increasing your point value. Normally the last things that I'll touch in the engine category is fuel system and ignition, and I almost never touch oil cooling or the intercooler, simply because they add weight. They add a significant amount of weight here, and they change the weight balance as well sometimes. So yeah, like you can see there, it adds about 20 pounds or so. So I try to stay away from that. Unless you're playing with realistic damage, you don't need that. So I normally try and stay away from that. But now what we're going to do is go back here to this, right? Now you can see that this decreases my point value. But remember how I was saying that it changes the weight balance? So you want your car to be as close to 50% as possible, so that it turns around the center of the car. Which is also the same reason why you want your car to be as low as possible without grounding out, so that the center of gravity is lower to the ground, makes the car feel more planted, and it'll handle better. Now these, I don't really see a benefit from doing this. It does, in this case, it decreases my braking distance a little bit, but not enough to be significant. Normally it's only by a couple of feet, and that can be changed more in the tuning settings. But that's it for upgrading cars. The next step in the journey is obviously to buy and install the parts, and then we're going to test it. Normally I'll go into tuning as well, change up a couple of things, but for now we're just going to leave that how it is, and we'll get back to that. And I'll see you guys once we're at the track. Alright, so we're here at the track with our Miata. I haven't tuned anything. I still left everything stock tuning, and we're just going to drive the car to see how it feels. Now we're rear wheel drive, so our launch is not going to be as good and we don't have that much power, so we don't really have that good of acceleration. I'm going to drive in first person here. Now, so far, the car feels pretty decent. It feels pretty planted. There's some things, obviously, that could be adjusted here and there, but for the most part, it feels pretty good. And I'm just doing a race around one of my favorite circuits. I'm doing 5 laps to get some testing time in, and I'm just racing against cars that are the same class as me. Now my gearing is a little bit off, I can tell already. I'm in 4th gear and I really can't go much more. It's accelerating pretty slowly, so I'll probably end up changing my gearing around here. Brakes feel pretty good. It handles really well. Turning is pretty solid. And I don't feel like I'm going to really spin out or anything, so the tire compound is pretty good too. But there's something off about my gearing here. I don't have enough acceleration for what I'd like to be able to do. The suspension feels okay. It feels soft. The car has a bit of body roll, but not a terrible amount. But overall, pretty solid build. And we're looking at trying to improve our lap times on this track too, so just keep an eye on those as well as I bump into some of these other cars. Now I'm not going for really first place here. I mean, you always want to be in first, but when you're testing out tunes, you're not trying to be in first. What you really want to go for is how the car feels, because the better the car feels to you, the better you're going to be able to perform with it. Okay. The better you're going to be able to perform with it in races, online, or events, or whatever you plan on doing with the car. You know, so far it feels pretty decent. Again, there's something off with the gearing. I think when I was looking at the gearing earlier, I noticed that it was pretty long gearing, so I'll probably end up changing that, which is one of the reasons why I like to have at least final drive tuning ability. That way I can tune for acceleration or speed or whatever I want it to be. Plus, when you change the power of the car, or you change, say, like you do an engine conversion or something like that, you're gonna want to change the gearing because it's gonna be all wonky. Everything's gonna be off. It's looking like our best lap time right now is about 1 minute and 12 seconds around this track. Not bad, not bad. Could be better. I've gone around this track a lot, so I really know this track pretty well. And I'd say for what you have in Forza Horizon 4, this is a pretty good range of everything that you're going to come across in the track, except for maybe like city driving. You got tight turns, you've got long sweeping turns, and you've got elevation changes as well. Obviously it's not going to include any rally or anything like that, even though I do like to put a couple tires off-road sometimes. But I mean, as you can see, like the car's not doing terribly. I'm sticking with it. I'm just kind of chasing these guys down, passing them one by one. I do believe I have the AI on the hardest difficulty or just the one below it. So they're not easy to race against by any means, especially when they're in different, faster, better cars than you. Like as you can see, all these Subarus and Evos are just passing me, probably because they have around 200, 300 horsepower, and I think we only had about 100, 150. So in terms of horsepower, we're behind, but in terms of turning, we're doing a little bit better than they are. I just wish my acceleration was slightly better than this. This is a pretty balanced build for the most part. I don't think I'm really going to change too much about it. Maybe just the tuning. And we'll get into that in the next video. Just gonna finish this last lap out here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Alright, that wraps it up. Pretty surprised that I won that there, as my car was definitely underpowered compared to the competitors, but overall, pretty solid race. Alright, well that's it for today's video, guys. I will see you all in the next one. We're going to be talking about tuning.